fire up all over the universe, in particular Facebook and Periscope and, of course, YouTube. YouTube is always the slowest, but it looks like we're online now. Hello, everybody. Welcome back to yet another episode of Watching the Watchers Live. My name is Robert Gruler. I am a criminal defense attorney here in Scottsdale, Arizona. You can see right there I'm with the R&R Law Group. I'm the founding partner here at our firm. And over the course of our years in practice, we have helped literally thousands of people facing criminal charges go through the justice system. And over the course of our time in practice, we've seen a lot of problems with that justice system. We've seen a lot of misconduct involving police officers, malfeasance from prosecutors, major issues with judges, and of course, incompetence and sometimes downright evilness from a lot of our politicians. And so what we want to do on this show is make sure that we're holding all of them accountable. We want to shine the beautiful sunlight of disinfectant down upon these people so that we can hold them accountable and make sure that you or I are getting the same system of justice that many of these other people are enjoying as a result of their privilege to a certain extent. And so today, of course, it is Monday, October 12th. We've got all Supreme Court all day. You can see this everywhere in the headlines. We're talking specifically about the confirmation hearing that just started. Today was day one in the Senate. The Senate Judiciary Committee had their first day of hearings today, and we've got some news that we want to share with you. Some clips. We've got some clips from Senator Ted Cruz. We've got different clips from Senator Dianne Feinstein. So we're going to go through that and do some analysis on it. Then we want to look a little bit forward and see what is it going to look like for these upcoming days. Remember, this is just day one. It's currently scheduled to go through Thursday, and it's going to be a lot more explosive than it was today. So if you watch the confirmation hearings today and you were a little bit sort of let down because you were expecting some more fireworks, some more activity, some more interesting tidbits, save that for tomorrow. That will all be forthcoming, and so we'll dive into that tomorrow. But let's just, let's unpack a little bit about what is going on in the Supreme Court. So, as you know, I am a criminal defense attorney, and I view a lot of things through that lens. And so when we're talking about, how the government works and how the next Supreme Court judge is going to be nominated and confirmed, and then sit on the bench for the next 40 to 50 years, you have to understand this is a big thing. This is a big deal in the American system of government. This doesn't happen all that often, especially in this type of situation where the balance of the court is going to be tipping from the conservative to even more conservative, right? So it's typically was a 5-4 sort of divide. Now it's looking like if Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed, it's going to be a 6-3. And one of the biggest things that we look for when we're talking legally is what we call a theme. Okay, what is the theme? So let's say, we're representing somebody in a DUI case. We're going to come up with we're going to review the facts of the case and then come up with a certain theme. And in particular, what we're talking about are different words that we're using. And you're going to hear things like justice or mistaken identity or, bad science. That would be a theme in a DUI case, okay? Bad science. We took the blood, we analyzed it down at the crime lab. They did all of this stuff, and they came up with a number, but that number is not really what that number is. And there's a lot of reasons why that can be. We can look at how they are mixing the different solutions that they're doing their testing. We can look at the gas chromatography machines, and there's a lot of things that can go wrong in a DUI analysis. But the point is, when you're explaining that to the jury, you don't want to get down into the nitty-gritty. You don't want to sit there and talk about gas chromatographs because people's eyes will glaze over. You really want to identify a theme. So bad science versus bad chromatographs, right? Bad science versus mislabeled blood vials or something like that. What you really want to do is give people something simple that they can latch onto and that will capture their attention. And so what I was looking for over this weekend is to identify what are the themes going to be from the different parties. What are the Republicans going to be saying and what are the Democrats going to be saying? And this is something where there's a pretty big divide between the two parties, not politically, but in terms, I would say, of competence when it comes to crafting these themes. The Republicans are just terrible at it. They don't do a good job with this stuff. The Democrats, by comparison, are very uniform. They come into these confirmation hearings with a game plan and they execute. We saw this systematically with the Brett Kavanaugh hearings. Do you remember that? The entire theme of those entire confirmation hearings were all about this high school sexual rape allegation that happened 25 years ago. And every single one of the Democratic senators on the Judiciary Committee were just beating that drum over and over and over again. One of the more familiar one, when we were thinking back to, there was another confirmation hearing, there was another hearing that took place in the Senate. I don't remember what it was, but remember when they all came out and they all were saying reclaiming my time. I forget which one that was. Remember that though? They all came out reclaiming my time. We're reclaiming my time. I'm reclaiming my time, and we're all thinking, where the hell did this phrase come from? Why did they all just start saying that? Well, it's because they got the memorandum. Somebody on high said that every time we ask, it was the Bill Barr confirmation hearing we covered here on this show. They would ask him a question and they would just immediately shout their talking point, reclaiming my time. And then that was sort of that ongoing joke. And many people are still using that. If somebody keeps talking, you just shout at them, I'm going to reclaim my time. Maybe that's different in your social circles than mine. But the point is, they're very uniform. They have a plan and they execute on the plan. So when we were analyzing what was going to be happening today, I was trying to decide what is the plan going to be? What are they going to do to approach this confirmation process? Because as it stands, the Republicans have everything they need. We've covered it here several times on this channel, but the Republicans have the votes that they need to confirm Amy Coney Barrett, unless something changes, unless she falls apart during these confirmation hearings. I think it's pretty much a done deal. The Republicans have the vote. The Senate Democrats do not. So how are they going to attack this? How are they going to approach this? Well, you may have been following along, if you're not on this channel, elsewhere. You're going to be seeing a lot of information or a lot of questions being asked of the Biden-Harris campaign, in specific about whether or not they're going to be doing any court packing. We've covered this concept here on this show. We're going to revisit it here in a minute to explain what is court packing, because what the Democrats are doing right now is they are actually redefining that term, and it's happening right before our eyes. And it's a very powerful persuasion technique. It's very powerful that they're going to be able to take a word that you or I would automatically know what it means and repackage it, redefine it in a way that's going to be compelling, and it's going to actually put the pressure back on the Republicans. And it's actually ingenious, and it's pretty amazing how effective it looks like it's being. So the same thing that we saw happen with the Bill Barr confirmation hearing or that Senate hearing, they're doing again. So on Sunday, when I was reading through the news and reading through Twitter, I saw a headline that said that the GOP is packing the Supreme Court. So in the debate, Joe Biden said that he was not going to answer the question about whether he would be packing the court. Kamala Harris has been asked that question multiple times. She also declined to say whether that they were going to pack the court or not. We also saw that very recently a reporter asked Joe Biden specifically, are you going to tell voters, are you going to pack the court? Are you going to answer that question? People want to know. This is an election. The election's in 28 days or something. What is your position on this? And he said the voters don't deserve to know, or that was his paraphrase of this. So the campaign is being very tight-lipped on this, in large part because they don't want to alienate one side or the other. If they say they're going to pack the court, they're going to alienate all the moderates. If they say that they're not going to pack the court, then they're going to alienate all of the left, who wants them to pack the court, provided that Amy Coney Barrett does get seated onto the Supreme Court. So they've been very, very tight-lipped about this, and they probably are recognizing that this is hurting them in the polls. People want to know, are you going to get elected and then reform our third branch of government, the entire judiciary, or not? We deserve a solid answer on this. I would like to know the answer to that, right? That would be indicative. That would help me decide what to do with my vote, or how to educate other people when they ask me about my vote. I'm a lawyer. The federal judiciary, the Supreme Court, it's a very important issue to me, what I do, to my entire office, to how we operate things. So we want to know. We deserve an answer to that question, and we haven't heard. But what the Democrats are now doing, and quite geniusly, brilliantly, is they are redefining that term, because they know that getting hit with this court packing claim that they're going to pack the court is damaging to their brand. It's damaging to the way that they want to be perceived to the average American voter. So they have now modified that, and they're saying, no. We're not packing the court. You are packing the court, GOP. You are packing the court, Republicans, and you've been doing it for a long time. So the definition of what court packing is actually being changed. This was from the Washington Post. It was posted on Sunday, October 11th, and this was the first place that I saw it. This was a screenshot on Twitter that somebody posted. I don't get the hard copy of the newspapers anymore, but you can see here that the headline, I think this was in the opinion section, the GOP is packing the Supreme Court in slow motion. And that's just not a legally, that's not accurate according to the definition of what court packing is. The GOP is replacing vacant seats, but they're not actually expanding or changing the definition of the courts. They're not broadening the judiciary. They're just replacing other judges who have left office. And so this headline is saying the GOP is packing the Supreme Court. And look at all of these statements that are just incorrect, but they're just statements, right? The 2020 election isn't about whether to expand the size of the court. Well, it kind of is. It kind of is becoming about that. This is what everybody is up in arms about. Everybody right now is, at least from the Democratic side, is very upset that the GOP is pushing forward Amy Coney Barrett. And their response to that is that they may possibly pack the court. They may possibly add additional judges, which would expand the size of the Supreme Court, and they would do it for political purposes. So that's just not accurate. And the next point is that it isn't about whether the Democratic nominee states his position on court packing. And again, yes, it is. A lot of reporters, and we've got clips from them, are getting tired of this sort of wishy-washy non-answer from the Biden-Harris campaign. They want to know more about this because this is a major issue in our government. If they're going to take our court, which is 9 judges right now, and expand that to 15 or more judges, that's going to fundamentally change the way that the country works. So it is about these questions. And the election, this article goes on to say it's about one thing, it's a referendum on Trump and so on and so forth. And this was where this all started, but I saw this sort of permeate throughout the rest of the Twitterverse after this initial seed was planted. So once this headline came out, somebody somewhere drafted a memorandum and it went out to all of the blue check marks on Twitter. It went out to all of the media people. And we started to see this theme percolate over the weekend. Then we saw today that it came out in full force. There was some more commentary about it yesterday, and then today we saw it kind of all over the place. This idea that the GOP, the Republican Party, is actually the party that is packing the courts. This slide comes from another Twitter account. This is from Sam Berger DC, who is not a blue check mark, but according to his bio, he was the VP of Democracy and Government Reform, and he was a former senior policy advisor for the Obama White House. So somebody very high up, a senior policy advisor for Obama, right? Which is the same administration that Joe Biden was a part of. And he is putting out this new slide from whatever his organization is. And he is saying that this is evidence that the conservative federal court packing has been taking place dramatically from 2015 to 2018. So under President Obama, they only appointed 2 judges. Donald Trump came in and appointed 30. President G.W. Bush, had 10 in that 1 year, and President Obama had 16. But now, fast forward to 2018, you can see, oh my goodness, this is a really big red line here. Really big, which means that this must be dangerous. This must be the Republicans and the GOP packing the court. This is them packing the court, and they're literally changing this definition. You can see that they are actually saying that this is court packing in action, conservative federal court packing, number of appellate judges confirmed by the U.S. Senate. And this is all just normally within the regular confines of the rules, right? This is what both parties have been doing for a long time. When there's vacancies in the court, they nominate, appoint, and confirm new judges. It's not any different than if our receptionist left, we'd put a new receptionist in there. It's not somebody who is, we're not adding 10 other receptionists because we didn't like that one receptionist. We didn't like her. We didn't like how she was answering the phone, but we can't get rid of her. So what we're going to do is we're going to add 5 other receptionists and say they're going to answer the phone calls, and then we're going to overwhelm the bad receptionist. So it's just changing the definition, and it is strange at how well it's doing. This is now being spouted by senators. We've got 2 clips of that here that we'll share with you in a minute, but I want to show you sort of the contortions that these people are going through in order to redefine this idea of court packing. And this is not my point on this is not political. Whether it's legally allowed, you are allowed to expand the size of the Supreme Court. You're allowed to do that. If the Democrats win the presidency, they have the House and they have the Senate, then certainly they can. They can pass it in Congress. They can send it over to President Joe Biden or Kamala Harris if she's there, and they can sign it and they can expand the Supreme Court. It's part of our laws. They can do that. The court the size is dictated by Congress, so that's no problem. But the question is has the GOP been packing the court? And so this is from another fellow by the name of James Surowiecki, and he had a bizarre sort of contortion here where he was trying to explain that this is actually federal, or this is GOP court packing. So he says, so this is from Andy McCarthy. He says it takes two things to appoint a justice: the POTUS nomination and a Senate majority approval. In 2016, if the Dems had the latter, Obama would have gotten a third justice. That would not have been packing. Dems didn't have it, and therefore they didn't get the third. And that's how the constitutional system works. And that's exactly right. Exactly right. All of this back and forth between the both parties about this being inappropriate, or they're all sort of twisting themselves into pretzels to justify their actions. We all know what it is. It's just partisan politics. That's all it is. And it's okay to call it that. So when Mitch McConnell comes out and says, during the Merrick Garland times, no, we're going to leave it to the voters, but then flips his position and says, no, well, we have the Senate. What I meant to say was, if we have the presidency and the Senate, then we'll go ahead and move forward with the confirmation. So, the rules are changing. Lindsey Graham's flip-flopping. Everybody flips-flops. These are all politicians. That's sort of in their DNA. And so now what we're saying is, it's the GOP. Yeah, they got the votes, they got the Senate, they got the time to do it. So they're going to ram through a nominee the same way the Democrats would have done it. And if anybody thinks that they wouldn't have done it, like they would have had the presidency and the Senate and just said, let's just wait a little while and see if we can wait and let the voters decide. If anybody thinks that that is a reality, like that's the true way that they would handle this situation, okay, because that's just, come on, a little naive on that in my opinion. But so we go back, and this individual is now saying it takes two things. We have the statement from Andy McCarthy. Then we go back and we're going to see that James Surowiecki says, even on its own terms, this is wrong. Merrick Garland never got a chance to get a majority approval from the Senate because Mitch McConnell single-handedly prevented his nomination from coming to the floor, which is accurate, right? He never got a vote because Mitch McConnell wouldn't let it happen. And that's because Mitch McConnell was in control of the Senate. As the Senate majority leader, he gets to decide who comes up for a vote and who doesn't. If the Senate had actually voted on Garland's nomination, Dems could complain, but nominees would have been voted down before. But McConnell short-circuited the process precisely because he was worried that a few GOP senators would cross the aisle and support Garland. Let's be clear. So anytime somebody says, let's be clear, you got to brace yourself, because whatever comes next is probably not clear. It's probably a statement that's not supported by evidence or supported by facts, but they say, let's be clear. Politicians do this all the time. Joe Biden does it. Everybody does it. And it's annoying. It's one of the most annoying phrases that I think I can ever hear. Let's be clear. Don't say let's be clear. Just be clear. What do you have to say it for? Just say it. If it's a clear point, it'll be clear on its face. You don't have to tell us it's going to be clear. Here's what he says. Mitch McConnell effectively shrank the size of the Supreme Court in 2016 and expanded it again in 2017 purely for political reasons. Whatever you think of changing the size of the court, it is absolutely true that McConnell already did it. So a couple issues here, right? The size of the Supreme Court didn't change. By Congress, by statute, by the way that it's set up, it's 9 judges. It was 9 judges in 2016, and it was 9 judges in 2017. Because there was a missing judge, that doesn't mean that the size of the court changed. It was just the same size. It was just missing a judge. And that judge was nominated shortly thereafter. It was Judge Gorsuch, and now he's seated on the Supreme Court. And that's because the Republicans controlled the Senate. If the Democrats controlled the Senate right now, you better believe that they would not be nominating, or they would not be even holding confirmation hearings on Amy Coney Barrett, but they don't. That's the thing. So the idea that Mitch McConnell was packing the court or adjusting the size of the judiciary, it just isn't accurate, right? It's the same size. It just had a vacancy. And all that the Republicans are doing now is filling the vacancy, just like they've been doing for a long time in the district courts. So this is something that, the definition, the way that it's changing so quickly is pretty scary. That this is something that can sort of, come out as a memorandum on high. You can see it just trickling down to all of the different figureheads throughout the media and throughout the Twitterverse. We see this again in some other spots. So this was another blue check mark on Twitter. 6-3 conservative court is packing the court. So you can see how that definition is even flying a little bit further, right? VP Mike Pence, Joe Biden, and Kamala Harris want to pack the court, but we're not going to let that happen. She says a 6-3 conservative court is packing the court. And so, a lot of the people now are just saying that because they don't like the ideology of the court, that is packing the court. And it's just not accurate. Just because you don't like it, it doesn't mean that they're packing the court. They're filling the vacancies. They're playing the rules of the game that were already in place. Packing the court is changing the rules. It's saying we're going to add new rules. We're going to change the game. And that's what people are concerned about, because for the last 150 plus years, we've had 9 judges on the Supreme Court. When FDR tried to expand that by adding another 15, or taking it from 9 to 15 judges, that was a big deal. People were very upset about that because, as I said, it's fundamentally changing the balance of power, the structure of the court. And there have been times in American history, in our democracy, where we've had a left-wing court and more of a right-leaning court. And so the court's ideology changes all the time. But the point is, the court is supposed to be apolitical. It's supposed to be not ideological. And we're all human beings, so there is going to be an ideological bend. And so what we're asking now is, how are these judges going to interpret cases that appear before them? And so that's what this confirmation hearing is all about. There should be inquiring about what Amy Coney Barrett is going to do when and if she is seated on the Supreme Court. This wasn't just left to blue checkmark people on Twitter. We have actual senators now who are out saying, sort of parroting these same talking points, that the Republicans are packing the court. Mitch McConnell's packing the court. So this comes from Senator Hirono out of Hawaii. And I think the audio is a little quiet on here. I apologize if it is. But she's talking specifically about packing the court as well, and saying the GOP does it.
And Kamala Harris have been not giving completely clear answers about their plan if they were to win for court packing. And why? I guess I'm just confused about their answers. I mean, why not say? I understand that they want to keep laser focused on the fast track that Judge Amy Coney Barrett is saying. So why not say something like that? Say, we're just trying to stay focused on this. We haven't even talked about it yet, instead of appearing to hedge and give a non-answer.
I have been thinking about court reform for a number of years.
All right, so see how they're doing that? So they're calling that court reform. So this is something else that's very interesting from a lot of the politicians in general. They go through and they change the names of certain statutes or certain concepts. So here, Senator Hirono is now talking about court reform. I don't even know what that is. Okay, if you go through the process and you nominate judges and they get seated onto the Supreme Court through the normal electoral process, through electing senators who will advise and consent, and then they will confirm the president's nominee. That's it. What do we need to reform? The process is working as it should. What she's talking about here is reforming the ideology of the court. She doesn't want to reform the process. She doesn't want a 6-3 conservative majority. She wants to reform that. And so she's using this as justice reform or court reform in order to make it sound appeasing. This happens all the time, right? Just like the U.S. Patriot Act. Like, hey, you're a patriot if you sign on to limitless surveillance of your life by the U.S. government. You're a patriot. If you don't support the Patriot Act, then you're not a patriot. You must hate America. You see this all the time with gun rights legislation. The last one I saw was the Hunters Protection Act. Hunters, freedom to hunt, protection and safety protection act. Well, what's in the Hunters Protection Act? That sounds pretty good. If you're a firearms owner and you like hunting, that's a pretty damn good act, you want to say. That sounds great. I support that act, right? Until you read about it, and it's all about limiting magazine size and shortening barrels, and it's significantly limiting different types of firearm ownership, but they frame it in a way that says it's the Hunters Protection Act or something like that. So that's exactly what's happening here. She's talking about court reform. What she's really meaning is she's talking about ideological court reform in order to give her side a more favorable, according to her, view of how the court should function.
About court reform, which, by the way, it will take serious discussion. It's just not a matter of, do you want this change? Do you want that change? That kind of discussion doesn't happen unless the Democrats take back the Senate. And yes, I expect Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to be laser focused on the potential for this country to give this out of control president, chaotic president, another 4 years. That is exactly what they ought to be focused on.
They are.
In the meantime, by the way, I am really concerned about the court packing with the ideologically driven nominees now sitting on the court, some 200 of them, that Trump has been putting on the court, aided and abetted, of course, by Mitch McConnell, whose goal in life is to make sure that there's absolutely no vacancy that he won't fill with these very ideologically conservative. They're against ACA, they're against LGBTQ rights, they're against civil rights, you name it. These are the kind of people who are getting on the courts right now. I'd like to see a court that we can feel assured will be objective and fair, and people who do not have an ideological axe to grind.
I mean,
it just, it's amazing that these people are allowed to get away with this stuff. She just said that the Republicans and the conservatives are packing the courts, and we need court reform because she doesn't want people who are ideologically driven. So she's just trying to substitute her ideology in place of the ideologies that she doesn't like. Okay, we're going to get to this with Amy Coney Barrett, but we're going to get to clips from her here in a quick second where she's saying that I should be reading the law and interpreting the law as it stands. She's saying we're a country of laws. Congress can pass the laws. The judges' duty is to apply the law to the set of the facts that are in front of them. That's what conservative judges do. That's the whole point. That's their whole philosophy. That's Scalia's philosophy, originalism. What does the original text of the law say? That's an ideology, which I happen to agree a lot with. Let's look at the law. Let's not look at the law and change the law and make it, fit the facts or give us an outcome that we want. We may apply the law. We may not like the outcome. The outcome may not be a just outcome or what we consider to be a fair outcome, but the law is what the law is. If you don't like the law, you got to go back and change the law. It's not up to the judges to decide on an ad hoc basis, case by case, what is fair and what isn't fair. They should be applying the laws. That's my interpretation of it. So when Senator Hirono comes around and then says, well, we need court reform, we're going to change that, we're going to replace their ideology with my ideology, it's ideological, but they hide behind this guy sitting there saying, these judges are unfair and they're biased and they don't support the Affordable Care Act and they don't support LGBTQ. They don't support any of those things. So we need to do something about this. Well, we already have a system in place to do something about this, right? It's called the elections, which all of the senators who are now in the Senate right now, who are all a part of this confirmation hearing, they've all been elected. They've all been elected to this term, and their duty is to do their job. And part of that job right now is to have a confirmation on Amy Coney Barrett and then vote up or vote down on it. Now, that Senator Hirono was not the only one parroting this talking point. We saw it again from Senator Dick Durbin.
That Vice President Biden used the phrase court packing. Was that a tell of where the vice president stands on this, that he doesn't want to see this happen?
Well, I can tell you that we're getting this question. It's a common question.
Because it is.
American people have watched the Republicans pack in the court over the last 3.5 years, and they brag about it.
All right, so there you saw it, right? The Republicans have been packing the courts for the last 3.5 years, and they brag about it. That's from Senator Durbin. He says, it's a common question. They've taken every vacancy and filled it, is the next sentence that comes out of his mouth. And he goes on and sort of just, continues parroting that line. These people are like a broken record. They get the memorandum, they program it into their subroutines, and they go out there and they just say the Republicans have been packing the court, packing the court, packing the court. Because if they say that long enough, then the definition is going to change to this, which means anybody who gets appointed to fill a vacancy is suddenly being packed into the court. It's a total manipulation of the definition, and they're getting away with it because these people are not calling them out on that. Let's see if there's any response to his statement.
Filled it. Did you know that they've sent us, and we have approved only with their votes, I might add, 10 people who have been judged unanimously unqualified by the American Bar Association? Do you know how many judicial nominees came from Obama who were judged unanimously unqualified? None. So we are dealing with people on the court, packed into the court with little or no qualification, who are going to be there for a long time.
Packed.
So it's understandable. The Republicans raised the issue of court packing.
Yeah.
Senator, the lack of answering this question sounds like as if the Democrats are trying to game the results here and just trying to see what happens, and that in some ways it may be that it comes across as a negotiating tool with trying to maybe convince a handful of Senate Republicans to delay these confirmation hearings. Is that what this is? Is this a negotiating ploy?
It is not a negotiating point. We are dealing with the reality. a lifetime appointment to the highest court in the land. McConnell has changed the rules for the Republican senators. We are running this through at a breakneck pace without the investigation that usually comes with these. And those are the issues. And what we're trying to drive home to the American people is this makes a difference in your life as to whether or not you have health insurance, whether or not with a pre-existing
and there it is,
you can afford health insurance. And we believe that once the Republican voters across this country wake up to the reality of this strategy, many of them are going to say to their senators, listen, this is not what we bargained for. We may be conservative, but we're not crazy. Our family needs health.
Yeah. So you just saw there was the other theme that came out today. So it's two things, court packing and the ACA. Those were the big themes today because there is the Affordable Care Act. There is a case that is going to be set before the Supreme Court docket. I think the week of or the week after the election. I have the dates here in a minute. So all of the senators today are also coming down on Amy Coney Barrett because they think that she's going to be ruling against the Affordable Care Act. But before we dive into that, we've got some clips from the actual confirmation hearing today. I want to beat home this court packing thing because it irritates me so badly. This is what the Supreme Court looked like when Judge Ginsburg was on it. You see that? 5-4. We have 5 conservative judges. Roberts, kind of a toss-up. You can throw him on either side. And you've got 4 reliably liberal judges. And this is 9. 5 plus 4 equals 9. I went to law school, but I can do some basic math. And that's 9 people. So what we're talking about as this moves forward is now we have a vacancy. Okay, this is it. The size of the court hasn't changed. We still have 4 conservative judges and sort of 4 kind of liberal judges. Roberts could theoretically be over here. And you've got this vacancy here. So the size of the court hasn't changed. It's just a vacancy. Now, Donald Trump, this is his 3rd pick. He had the opportunity to nominate Gorsuch. Then Kavanaugh was next. And now Trump's number 3 is going to be Amy Coney Barrett. So now she has been slotted into this position. And now they're saying that this situation is packing the court, literally. So going from a 5-4, having 9 judges, to just replacing that vacancy to a 6-3 is somehow packing the court. But the question that they will not answer is this. Are they going to do this if this is the change? If the Supreme Court now looks like it's a 6-3, are they going to add on 4 additional judges? 4 additional reliably liberal judges that they would have the opportunity to promote and nominate and confirm because they would have the presidency and they would have the Senate. And so they could easily stack the court. Now that would be 13. Okay, 7 plus 6. 13, not bad, right? Not too bad. So what we're talking about is this would be something that they could even go beyond that. They could go to 15, they could go to 17, they could go to 21. They could theoretically change the size of the court for essentially another 150 years until the Republicans are able to tie that back in. But even if that were the case, like let's say that this all flips. Let's say the liberals, the Democrats actually secure the presidency and the Senate, and they appoint these 4 additional judges. So we get into a situation like this. If all of those judges have lifetime appointments, then the size of this court theoretically could not shift back to conservative until all of these 4 additional judges are replaced. And that could be 50 years, 50, 60, 70 years, 100 years, maybe 150 years if this last period of time is any indicator. So certainly concerning. And the Democrats are not answering this question. Kamala Harris won't answer it. Joe Biden won't answer it. And now the senators and the different media sycophants are all out there also changing the definition. They don't want to answer this question anymore, so they're just redefining it. This is not court packing. This is not court packing at all, according to them. This is court packing. But it's pretty clear what they really want to do. And the fact that they're not answering that is certainly concerning. If somebody doesn't say no, I think the answer is yes. It's my humble opinion on that one. All right, so now let's dive in. So that was the theme over the weekend. We got a lot of this information about packing the court. A lot of the talking points came out, and we had the day 1 of our confirmation hearings. They took place. You can see here, this is the schedule for the Senate Judiciary Committee. You can see right here that this was day one, and it's going to be 4 days of this stuff. So today was by and large the most boring. Tomorrow on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, we're going to have more hearings. I think it's going to be wrapped up by Thursday. We'll have a vote, and or we'll have some indication of what's happening later. But this is going to be the meaty stuff. Okay, today was very, very boring. It was mostly opening statements, not a lot of substance there. Tomorrow, Wednesday and Thursday, we're going to have a lot of meat and potatoes, I think. Every single senator on the Senate Judiciary Committee gets an opportunity to ask questions for 30 minutes during the first round. So one senator versus Amy Coney Barrett for 30 minutes. That's a lot. Then they're going to have a second round, and that's going to be another 20 minutes. So every senator who's on that Judiciary Committee is going to have an opportunity to use 50 minutes of Q&A of Amy Coney Barrett. Now remember, she was already confirmed to the 7th Circuit. She's already been questioned by the Senate Judiciary Committee. She's already seen a lot of these people before. We played on this channel the clip of Senator Dianne Feinstein, sort of getting into it with her. You've probably seen it all over the place about saying the dogma lives loudly within you and so on and so forth. We are probably going to get some of the same questions, but let's see if we can tease out what we may be looking for. So as a refresher, this is the Senate Judiciary Committee. These are the Republicans in the majority: Senator Lindsey Graham, Chuck Grassley, John Cornyn, a couple big ones. Mike Lee is on that. He, I think, just tested positive for COVID. Ted Cruz was appearing virtually. He is quarantined as a result of COVID. And, you've just got a lot of people. Some of these people you may remember, some you may not. Then we go over to the minorities. So this is the Senate Democrats. And we've got some very familiar faces here. We spent a lot of time on this channel talking about Dianne Feinstein. We've got Dick Durbin, who we just played a quote from. We've got Amy Klobuchar. You may remember her from the Democratic primaries. We've got Cory Booker. May remember her also. Senator Hirono, we just discussed. And then the former prosecutor of the bunch, the head law enforcement for the state of California for a period of time, was Kamala Harris. She is also on the Senate Judiciary Committee. And so today what we had was just opening statements. And it was pretty mind-numbing. And I will tell you that. I was listening to it for most of the morning, and it was the same talking points over and over and over again. And they really kind of boiled down, and they were into two different buckets. On the one bucket, you had this just constant drum-beating theme. An election is already underway. 6 million votes have been cast. The election's 28 days away, so on and so on and so on. This should all be delayed until after the election, and let the American people speak. So that's the one big talking point. The other big talking point today was about the Affordable Care Act. And so all of these senators, they had 10 minutes to do their opening statements. And then Amy Coney Barrett, at the end of the day, she had the opportunity to give her opening statement. And so for all morning, all day, and most of the afternoon here in Arizona, we were hearing a lot of these senators just pontificating for 10 minutes about Lord knows what. Very little of it having to do with Amy Coney Barrett. Very little of it having to do with any substantive decisions or identifying cases that that could be problematic. It was more about just getting these talking points on the record about taking away your health care and subverting an election that's already underway. Those were the big talking points from the Democrats. The Republicans are a lot less organized. They are just all over the place. And a lot of these guys, to me and gals, seem like they're just sort of winging it, sort of ad-libbing, just talking about how qualified she is and how about, the Senate has a duty, but there's no real concrete theme that they have. The Democrats are much better at this. Their theme, subverting an election and undermining, ripping healthcare out of everybody's mouths, essentially, who deserves it. We're killing people with pre-existing conditions if we confirm Amy Coney Barrett, and we are subverting election and the will of the American people if we confirm Amy Coney Barrett. So we're not going to do either one of those. That's what the Democrats are saying. The Republicans, by contrast, are sort of just all over the place, like whatever, and they're pretty terrible about getting organized. I think that the Democrats must have a Slack channel or a Discord or something, and they just get their talking points and they just run with them. They do a very good job of it. And so as we were able to see today, there were 10-minute opening statements, Some of the senators were appearing virtually over a Zoom. Some of them had their cell phones going off in the background. I mean, it was kind of bizarre, but apparently there's all sorts of COVID compliance going on. There's people in masks. We had the super spreader event over at the White House, so everybody's on high alert. And it was a little bit COVID strangeness going on, but nothing too distracting. We saw opening statements from these people. If you're not following this stuff on C-SPAN, I'd recommend that you do. They do a nice job of covering all of the different proceedings, and then they actually break them up almost immediately. So these are the different opening statements that we heard. Again, 10 minutes each. Senator Grassley, Senator Leahy, Senator Cornyn, Senator Feinstein, Senator Klobuchar, Senator Sass, and just on and on and on and on. It's like, I'm just so sick of hearing from these people. It's the same talking points over and over and over again. It's all a political show. It's all election season. All these people are just rifling through their talking points, and it's not really substantive. It's not really productive for you or I, the people who are going to be governed or who are currently governed by these knuckleheads and by the Supreme Court. So not particularly interesting today, but we do have some stuff that we want to get through. All right. So Amy Coney Barrett, she had her statement, and I want to talk a little bit about it. She did a good job. I thought this was somebody, this is somebody who's highly polished. I've seen her. I watched her 7th Circuit Court of Appeals nomination, opening statement for that confirmation proceeding. And she talked about a lot of stuff. And I think she does a pretty nice job of outlining this broad idea of who she is as a person. So she had, when she gave her statement, a couple things I wanted to highlight. She said that, I thought this was a clever line, that she's used to being a party of 9 because she's got such a big family. This is a good way to tie her family into the conversation. So you want to think about this in terms of persuasion. That's all of this is coming down to, right? Amy Coney Barrett needs to essentially convince the American people. She needs to provide some cover for senators to vote for her. She needs to give the senators in there a good reason to support her. And so the bigger net that she can cast, the more people that she can say that she's sort of embodies, then the more likelihood that she's going to give those senators cover. And so as you're watching these senators question her during these confirmation hearings, just kind of ask yourself, what are these senators going to latch onto and take back to their constituents back home? We're going to see that here in a clip from Senator Feinstein. So watch how this sort of unravels a little bit. So Amy Coney Barrett's going to come in. It's kind of like a game of football. They're all running different plays. There's a lot of strategy that's going on here, and you can unravel a lot of it. But Amy Coney Barrett is making a big push for family, right? For mothers, for wives, for religious people, for that demographic that identifies with what she's doing. Somebody who's who's highly accomplished, extremely intelligent woman, somebody who's just dominated her field, first in her class at Notre Dame, immediately confirmed to the 7th Circuit. She's been a professor. She's got, I think, 7 children. So she's got, husband. She's one of 9 with her husband and 7 kids. So, it's this very sympathetic, very open appeal to the people in those demographics, because those are the demographics that are going to give the other senators from the Republican side cover to vote for her. And so she talks a lot about it. I'm used to being, a party of 9. She said her marriage was easy. She said, well, my marriage was really easy. And she talked to a friend of hers, and her friend said, does your husband feel that way? And she decided, I'm not going to go talk to my husband about it to confirm if he thinks it was easy. So sort of jovial, sort of fun, and a little bit, lighthearted to some degree. She talks a lot about her kids. She goes through every single child that she has, says that Tess, who's 17, has a math gene. One of them is an author, already writing short stories. She's got an impressive young family. 2 of them, I think, were adopted. One, Benjamin, has Down syndrome, which rings the bell for a lot of people. I have a Down syndrome brother, and it's, wow, okay, you do. I can identify with that. I can understand what you had to go through raising that child. I know what that's like, having to raise my brother, or having to, be his older brother. He's 1 year younger than me. We grew up together. I know that. I can identify with that. And that's what she's trying to accomplish. That's what she's trying to do. She goes through, she says, I got all my friends in attendance, my parents are watching from home, and she just is really talking about all this support, this really wholesome nuclear family, somebody that you would want as a judge, right? Somebody good-hearted, good spirit, good religious, good family, a lot of support. Everybody who's ever had anything to say about Amy Coney Barrett says she's pretty much amazing. So that's the shtick that she's going for. And so what are the Democrats going to do with that type of an appeal? What do you do with that? It's different than Kavanaugh. Remember with Kavanaugh, the big part there was this guy was a rapist. This guy was somebody who, pinned a woman down and raped her in high school. And he formed these weird parties and he put all this stuff in a yearbook. And that was their appeal. So that was their cover. In other words, the Democrats had the cover that he's a rapist. Well, there's too many unanswered questions, so we're just going to not vote for him. That was their excuse to not vote for him. Republicans, they had their excuses to vote for Kavanaugh, their justifications, their reasons. And we're going to see those divides start to just formulate over these next few days. She says, a lot of her talk today was about sort of, women's power, in accomplishing things. And she talks about anything that girls can do, anything that boys can do, girls can do better. She went to an all-girls high school. She's got these amazing legal mentors who helped her, throughout the way. She talks about Judge Lawrence Silverman gave her first job. Justice Scalia, she was a clerk for, who is an impressive judge, whether you agree with his politics or not. The man was a brilliant man. There's a lot I disagree with because he was pretty terrible on criminal justice issues, but brilliant man nonetheless, somebody who is a powerhouse on the court, and his legacy will last for a long time. She was his clerk. Okay, that's amazing. She talks a lot about her philosophy, or actually not a lot about it, but we're going to get into more of it. We've got a short couple clips about how she's going to be answering these questions, and she's going to tie it all back to originalism. We're going to interpret the statutes as they're written. She says that courts have a vital responsibility to uphold the rule of law. She's got a quote talking about the Seventh Circuit, that she's reaching a conclusion that's dictated by the law. She says that, Sandra Day O'Connor was the first woman. Ruth Bader Ginsburg was in that seat. And she also talks about that she can never replace Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And so she's sort of, reaching out to cross the aisle to sort of recognize the legacy of RBG and say that I'll never be able to replace her. But, I do believe that I have a lot to offer in this role as an originalist. She also talks about being the first mother of school-aged children to sit on the court. And she talks about that she's the only justice who is not from Harvard or Yale who would be on the court. So you can see that statement is beautifully crafted to appeal to a number of different demographics, specifically to the moms, to the working women professionals, to, a lot of talk about Sandra Day O'Connor, Ruth Bader Ginsburg, all women's school, first mother of school-aged children. And, it's this theme about representing those demographics in a way that has not otherwise been represented before on the court. So it's expanding that net, and I think it was a pretty well done statement. Again, whether you disagree with her politics or not. And so the question then becomes, how do the Democrats respond to that narrative? What are they going to say? Are they going to find somebody from 25 years ago who's going to come out and say she's some sort of terrible person for some reason or another? Are they going to try to justify that? Or are they going to lean on some other angles? We don't know. Well, we kind of have an indication of it because we heard from Senator Dianne Feinstein today. She goes on for about 2 minutes, and she's falling into the election is already underway camp. And we'll explain why that is, I think, here in a minute.
Courts have a vital responsibility to the rule of law, which is critical to a free society. But courts are not designed to solve every problem or right every wrong in our public life. The policy decisions and value judgments of government must be made by the political branches, elected by and accountable to the people. The public should not expect courts to do so, and courts should not try. That is the approach that I have strived to follow as a judge on the Seventh Circuit. In every case, I have carefully considered the arguments presented by the parties, discussed the issues with my colleagues on the court, and done my utmost to reach the result required by the law, whatever my own preferences might be.
Yeah, and that's exactly, in my mind, what a judge should do, is look at the law and apply it to the facts. If you don't like the law, that's just too bad. That's what the law says. If you don't like the law, it's not the judge's job to change it or to craft a result that is more in alignment with that judge's personal opinions. If the law is bad, the Congress has to change the laws. Your local representatives, people who are in that part of the legislating bodies of our government, they're responsible for writing and changing the laws. If that function gets transferred over to the courts, then now we have two Congresses. And that's not what we're set up for. That's not how the system works. We don't want judges rewriting laws or coming to conclusions that support their personal beliefs. We want Congress to do that because the people vote the Congress people in. We vote our House of Representatives in. We vote our senators in. They're the ones responsible for making those decisions, and we can vote them back out. The judges should be people who are impartial. They read the laws, they apply them to the facts before them, and they reach a conclusion whether they like it or not. And Amy Coney Barrett goes on in that clip to talk about when she's actually drafting opinions, she puts herself in sort of the defendant's shoes, the person who her opinion may be ruling against, and she says, what if that was my child? What if I was ruling against my own son, my own daughter? Would I be okay with that opinion? And she says, yeah, as long as it's reasoned and as long as it's logical and as long as it's founded in the basis of the law. We're interpreting the statutes, we're applying the facts, and we come to a legal conclusion. If the outcome's not any good, that's the law. That's how it works. We're a nation of laws. We have to follow the laws. If you don't like the law, go change the law. But that doesn't mean that you don't apply it as it should be applied. And I think that's the only logical way to run a society and a system of anything, really. Write the rules, follow the rules. Don't like the rules, modify the rules. We have a system for that. We have a whole procedure for that. We can even amend the Constitution here. But you got to follow the rule. You got to follow the proper format. And, we just continue to go through, and we have another statement over here. This is from Senator Ted Cruz. Ted Cruz does this a lot where he will actually go through and he will, you remember this from the debates. When Senator Ted Cruz was in the Republican debates, he's very good at this. He's good at analyzing everything that goes on in front of him and then just scolding everybody for it. So he usually goes like in the middle. He'll say, this person was an idiot for saying that. This person's a moron for this, and so on and so forth. And then he sort of lays on his hammer. But what he has done here is going to be echoing exactly what I saw this morning. A lot of talk about Donald Trump, a lot of talk about, sort of issues that are tangential to what we're talking about at the confirmation hearing, but not particularly relevant. So we have a clip from him also. Where is it? Play.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning. Welcome to Judge Barrett. Welcome to your family. Welcome to your beautiful children who are here with you today. I want to start by making some observations about what we've heard this morning. At the very beginning, let me observe, as Sherlock Holmes famously observed, that what speaks the loudest is the dog that didn't bark, which is, to date, of every Democrat who's spoken, we've heard virtually not a single word about Judge Barrett.
Yeah.
We've heard a lot of attacks at President Trump. We understand our Democratic colleagues are not supporters of the president. We've heard a lot of political rhetoric. We just heard the senator from Rhode Island directing some attacks at Senator Cornyn from Texas, and I understand there's an election in a few weeks, so that those political attacks are not surprising.
Yeah, and so you can see here the theme from the Republicans is going to be...
We've heard very little about the nominee who is here.
Is going to be all about... This is, political posturing. It's all about political propaganda. The Senate has its duty. We've got to fulfill our obligations. The voters already spoke. That's why we're in office. We have a full term. Donald Trump talked about this recently, too. He said, look, I was elected for 4 years. I wasn't elected for 3.5 years. I was elected for 4 years. A vacancy opened up during my 4 years. The Republicans control the Senate. I nominated somebody. Those are the rules. That's how it goes. And so I think that's going to be sort of where these two things divide. We're going to talk a lot more about, I think, a lot of this stuff.
Americans of all backgrounds.
Let's listen to this.
I believe Americans of all backgrounds deserve an independent Supreme Court that interprets our Constitution and laws as they are written. And I believe I can serve my country by playing that role.
Yeah, and we're going to hear a lot more of that, right? That's originalism. That's taking a look at the statutes as they exist and then applying them to the facts. I spent a lot of time on that. So what are we going to hear about, I think, over these next couple days, Well, we know what's coming up in the Supreme Court, and one of the biggest cases that's going to happen right after the election, actually oral arguments are going to take place on Tuesday, November 10th. You can see here it's about Obamacare. So I put this little graphic in here, but the cases, they're being consolidated: California versus Texas, Texas versus California. And these are really kind of answering three questions, or asking three questions. This is what these cases in front of the Supreme Court are going to get to. Number one, does the minimum coverage provision of the Affordable Care Act still apply? Number two, does reducing the amount of the minimum coverage provision to zero, which is what Donald Trump did with the tax reform law. So if you remember, the Affordable Care Act had an individual mandate. You had to go get insurance. If you didn't, then you got penalized. The Supreme Court, through an opinion from Judge Roberts, said that that's valid. You're allowed to do that because that penalty is the same thing as a tax. And we have long held that you can be taxed to death. So this is just a new tax, no problem. We're going to pass that. Go get your health care. And if you don't, we're going to penalize you. Well, then Donald Trump came in and they reduced that penalty to zero. So now there is no penalty anymore. So, well, that was the only teeth. That was the only enforcement mechanism in the Affordable Care Act. So if those teeth are gone, what happens to the rest of the act? And then they want to know if it does invalidate it, then can that be severed from the rest of the act? So in other words, if there is no teeth, can we just get rid of the part with no teeth, or do we have to scrap the entire Affordable Care Act because of the fact that that was the enforcement mechanism, right? Without the key, the car doesn't work. You can't turn the car on without the key. You can't enforce the mechanism if you don't have the enforcement. You can't enforce the act if you don't have the enforcement mechanism. So this is going to come up. Now, we saw a lot of this just in play today. A lot of the senators were talking about it. It's this fear-based persuasion. They're trying to just hammer home that if they're connecting Amy Coney Barrett with losing your health care, with removing your coverage for preconditions, with eliminating all of the benefits that people think that Affordable Care Act brought them. And so they're tying this to that. If Amy Coney Barrett gets confirmed, then the Democrats can just run with that talking point. Say, look, she's on the court. The Affordable Care Act is going to be removed on November 10th because we're going to have oral arguments. The Supreme Court's going to hear it. And so they're going to latch onto this, and they're going to just make this the crux of why Amy Coney Barrett should not get nominated, knowing that she is going to get confirmed and she is going to be appointed to the court, and they're going to be able to continue to just hammer her, and the court ad nauseum about this issue. So, I think pretty smart politics on their part. The other question, the other issue that I thought I was concerned about or was curious as to whether they were going to bring up her faith. As we know, she's Catholic. She's somebody who is highly spiritual, highly involved in a number of different religious organizations. She's gotten a lot of flack from that. We heard from Senator Dianne Feinstein about that specifically, who said that, dogma lives loudly within you. I happen to be Catholic. I don't take orders from the Pope. I don't think she's going to take orders from the Pope either, but we will see. Now, is the faith issue going to come up? Well, if Joe Biden has anything to say about it, the answer is no. He came out today. This was posted earlier this morning from Bo Erickson over at CBS. Joe Biden's getting off a plane, and it's pretty loud, but see if you can make out what he is saying here, because he actually addresses that question. They were asking him specifically, should the Democrats or should any of the senators address Amy Coney Barrett's faith? And he says no.
How should Amy Coney Barrett's faith be considered by the Democrats during the hearing this week, sir?
No, faith should not be considered.
There should be no questions about her faith from Senate colleagues?
I don't think there's any questions about her faith. You may remember, I got in trouble when we were running against the senator who was a Mormon, the governor, okay? And I took him on. No one's faith should be questioned. But I tell you what, we're already in the midst of a real fight here. Everyone knows in 28 days, 20 million Americans may lose their health care.
There it is.
The nominee said she wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. The president wants to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Let's keep our eye on the ball. This is about whether or not in less than 1 month, Americans are going to lose their health insurance.
Mr. Biden, are you Mr. Biden?
Now watch this. Now watch this. Watch him run up these stairs. It's pretty good. It's not too bad. It's not too bad. Sometimes I get a little concerned about Biden, but he ran up those stairs like not even a problem. Pretty good job on that. But the point remains, right? He was talking about specifically, he says, no talk about her faith. I don't think that's fair. He says something like, remember I got in trouble for that at some point, and it's hard to hear him because he's talking quietly at that point. But I don't remember if he's referencing some other confirmation hearing where he got in trouble for that. But he is saying, he goes right back to the talking points. He's on point. He says, an election's already underway. We've already voted on this thing, or people are already voting, therefore we should hold off. So that's talking point bucket number one. Bucket number two is about the Affordable Care Act. There's 20 million people, he says, who are going to lose their health insurance if she gets nominated. We're in the middle of a crisis. Therefore, we need you, Democrats, to go out and vote. We need you to go elect me so that we can keep the Affordable Care Act, keep your health care, keep you safe, because the Republicans want to kill you. So we're going to continue to follow this story along. So if you have not already subscribed to our channel, go ahead and hit that subscribe button, because we do go live at this time every day, about 4 p.m. Arizona time, which is 7 p.m. Pacific time. And we do some coverage of the news of the day. And then we're going to jump right into the chat, which is what we're doing right now. So let's head on over to the chat on our YouTube channel. If you're watching anywhere else, we put this on our YouTube channel over because to the chat. It's the easiest place. We have the most comments here, and we've now got it open. So let's see what people are talking about today. The ACA, Michael Durham says, the ACA is a terrible law. If we must have a national health insurance, we can do better. No one loses health care, only the ACA insurance. All right. USA Libertarian says, spry. He's talking about Joe Biden. Biden forgot Mitt Romney's name. To be fair, so did most of America. Zuluzite, 20 million Americans losing their coverage overnight is a small price to pay for an imbalanced court. He was scared. The adrenaline got him moving, says Eric Twog. Hypocrite Catholic, abortion is an example. Yeah, and there's a lot to say on that. The abortion issue is one that I think we can go into, because I think there is a lot of misconception on this, and I will probably do a deep dive on this. I want to see how many of the questions come out about this specifically, but everybody just sort of latches on to Roe versus Wade. They hear about this case and they don't realize how much has changed. It's really a flagpole that everybody just likes to rally around, this Roe versus Wade thing, but there are other cases that happen, many other cases in that lineage of abortion jurisprudence. And so I think people just, they think the idea that if Roe versus Wade is overturned, that suddenly abortion is going to be outlawed. And I don't think that's the case, because there's other case law that supports it as a constitutional right and all these things. Roe versus Wade was in my opinion, a troubling case, not particularly because of the outcome. I'm not making a commentary on this channel about abortion. I'm making a commentary on the legal reasoning to reach a conclusion, which was essentially the opposite of what Amy Coney Barrett's talking about. It's the opposite of what the originalists are talking about. It's the Supreme Court who saw a set of facts in front of them and said, we're going to craft a law that addresses abortion, when in my mind, that is not their purview. That is the purview of Congress. Congress should deal with that. So again, I'm not commenting on, whether abortion should be legal or illegal, or, how this impacts me as a Catholic, but the legal reasoning, the philosophy, the logic in the Roe versus Wade case is just a type of legal conclusion that I think is troubling, because it's more analogous to a Congress than it is to a court. And this is where, this is what people are going. This is really what I think the battle is about when it comes to this. It's judicial interpretation. One is originalism. One is sort of, judicial activism, quite frankly. But that's what the battle is about. But people hear Roe versus Wade and they just think abortion. It's much more than that. It's much deeper than that. And the philosophical battle is going to take place. I think it's going to start tomorrow. Okay, so let's see. Ma the Fox says, your thoughts on the recent shooting in Denver involving Matthew Doloff. Many people are claiming it's self-defense, and many others and myself think it's at least manslaughter, if not murder. It's a loaded question, he says. So I am actually going to dive into that story. So I'm going to spend some time on that tonight, and I may do another video on it separately and apart from the Supreme Court stuff, because it is an interesting case. And quite frankly, I haven't done a deep enough analysis to comment on it right now. Zulu Zite says, supporting porn star banging isn't hypocritical at all. Good eye. How many times will I have to explain to people that we can't legislate personal religious beliefs? Yeah. keep saying it because I think it's true. There is a case getting ready to go in front of the Supreme Court that, if ruled upon favorably by 2A rights, would allow nonviolent felons to have their rights to possess firearms restored. Thoughts? Yeah, and so this was Amy Coney Barrett. She actually had an opinion on this. We covered it on this channel. The name of the case escapes me, but she has, I think, a pretty reasonable approach to it. So she's going through and she's saying that historically, if you go back into the original days, right, the idea that if you're convicted of a felony, you can't have a gun, that is historical. That comes from something. You know, we just didn't wake up one day and think that's a good idea in 2020. Let's just go ahead and pass that law. This is all trickling down from other law, from other precedent. And what Amy Coney Barrett did in that case in particular, she dissented, I believe, on that issue. And she said the majority in that opinion held that the ban on weapons for felons was constitutional. The way that she is distinguishing that or separating that out is she's saying, no, if you go back to the 1700s, if you go back to when our Constitution was written and you look at how things were in the 1700s when they were drafting the Second Amendment, they were not talking about dispossessing all felons of firearms, only the violent felons, only the ones where having a weapon would be dangerous for that person. Okay. If somebody has a history of aggravated assault with a weapon, yeah, maybe you don't want that person to have a weapon. Okay. But if that person was, fraudulently sending documents through the mail, or they have a drug problem and they get sober and they do their time and they, repay their debt to society, why are we still taking away one of their fundamental rights, which is a Second Amendment right to protect yourself? What does having a drug addiction have to do with possessing firearms? I mean, it really doesn't in my mind. It has almost nothing to do with it. But, in my opinion, criminal justice should be a lot more restorative, a lot more rehabilitative. Let's help people get back to where they were. Let's help them become good citizens again. And when you start ripping rights away from people, it puts them into this hole that they can never climb out of. They feel like they can't vote, like they can't own a firearm. They feel totally dispossessed of all the rights that you or I enjoy on a regular basis. And they feel like second-class citizens because in many ways they are, unfortunately. And if we want to, if we're going to say that people who are in trouble do their time, they serve their probation, they pay their fines, then in my mind, they have repaid their debts. Society asked them to do something. They did it. That contract is paid. They paid their bill. That's done and due. So if it's a nonviolent offense, I'm in total favor of restoring their rights because I think it's a fundamental right. And I don't think because you had an alcohol problem or a drug problem that you later solve, you pay your debts for, that you should have one of those most fundamental rights. The Second Amendment, right after freedom of speech, that second one, I don't think that should be taken away from you. So I am in total agreement with Amy Coney Barrett on that issue. And I would like to see more freedom. And I think that is the issue. That side of the issue leans itself to more freedom. All right, some other questions. Eric Twa, one reason health insurance is so costly is that as a man, I still have to buy insurance in case I become pregnant. There's a zillion other similar mandates. After a period of time, one-time felons should be able to get their rights restored, pointlessly punitive. Somebody says about that issue. And who does it ultimately benefit? There's a huge source of the costs. Felons should get the death penalty. I think that's a little bit extreme, of course. Here's a question. I have a mild case of Tourette's syndrome. Looking to buy a shotgun. Do you think I should? All right. No way they cost $75,000 per year to be housed and fed in a prison. That is more than most people earn annually. Yeah, I mean, the jails and the prison systems. Right now, we're doing a research project. I want to do a video on the history of jails in the United States. And I was doing some initial research on this. This is something like we just sort of accept. We just sort of wake up and we say, hey, we have these massive supermax prisons that look like cities. Where did these come from? What was the original system of justice back in the 1700s or the 1600s before the United States was founded? A lot of our systems of justice have changed dramatically. They used to be very rehabilitative. I was reading articles about the Quakers and how they would send people who were in trouble on these sort of intellectual, like deep spiritual, sort of endeavors. You had to spend a lot of time alone and in solitude and think about these things. And then there was, education and reform and getting you plugged back into a system that would integrate you and get you a job and all of that stuff. So what happened? Why did our system start treating people like numbers and like disposable pieces of garbage? When did that happen? And why are we still perpetuating that? And, is there a better way? So we're doing this project. I want to try to find, I really want to try to find the first picture of a jail in the United States. So I want to find the first photograph of a jail. I want to see what that looked like. So I've got some people working on that. I think it'll be fun. I know you criticize Roe, but how do you feel about substantive due process as a whole? It is how the Bill of Rights applies to the states. Yeah, so I'm a huge proponent of the Bill of Rights, a huge proponent of substantive due process, of procedural due process. Those are two sort of different things. One is that you get the procedure that you get, in other words, if you are convicted or charged with a crime, you get appointed a public defender to make sure that that procedure is done appropriately. Substantive due process is a little bit more about what rights are we talking about? What are those things that are protected? And when we talk about the federal Bill of Rights and the federal Constitution, that applies to the federal government. When we had the Civil War and we had the Reconstruction Amendments back in the 1800s, we had the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendment. The 14th Amendment was the one that really codified, and we've covered it on this channel, codified we call it incorporated a lot of the same due process rights, both procedural and substantive, to the states. So we just took those things that existed at the federal government and we applied them to the states, because what we were seeing is that some of the states were having issues with these things, right? They were violating procedural due process. They were violating substantive due process. And so I think that those are amazing concepts and I want to support them. But if they're going to be sort of, expanded in a way that they lose so much effect, or if the different entities of the government are going to be interpreting them differently. In other words, if the courts are acting like a Congress and they're creating their own versions of due process, and they're not applying the statutes, and they're expanding them and contracting them, and they're doing all sorts of things, that's not what the system is for. If we want to reform our system, if we want to change the system of government in the United States, that's a separate conversation. Okay, and we can have that conversation. There are a lot of people who think that should be the case. I was listening to Peter Zeihan. If you're not familiar with him, very interesting guy. And he was talking about global geopolitics, and he focuses a lot on demographics and populations and things like that. But one of his things that caught me off guard that he said was, yeah, we might be due up for a major rewrite of how we govern this country, which to me sounds like a nightmare. But it is still something that other people are talking about. Maybe the Constitution's outdated. Maybe we should reform these things. Maybe we really don't need a judge, or we need a tribunal on human rights, or all of these different things. There's some really bizarre ideas out there, but that's a separate conversation. Our current system of government, which I think is brilliant, I think it works very well. I think it's in large part the reason why America is as strong and powerful and amazing and free as we are, is because of this system. And so if you start now changing that system, you say, yeah, we have an executive, we have a legislative branch, we have a judicial branch, but, we're kind of just going to mash all of these things together. And the judicial branch can do some of what the Congress does. And Congress can do some of what the president does. And the president starts writing all of these executive orders and exercising powers that should have been reserved over to the Congress or over to the judiciary. That's not how it works. That's not okay. That's not the law. You can argue that you can change the law, but you can't just start, moving around responsibilities and duties from one branch to the other just to serve your goals. So I've got issues with all of these agencies overstepping their bounds, but that is how the system was designed. Remember, we have checks and balances. The founders knew that all of these different entities would be competing for power all over the place. And they designed it so that we could check, each branch could check the other branches in a way that would sort of nudge them back towards their hula hoop. Stay in your hula hoop. Don't come out of there. And so when we're talking about Roe versus Wade, that was the judiciary stepping outside of its hula hoop. And that is not me making a comment on whether abortion is okay or bad. That's not the point here. The point is that the logic, the determination, the conclusion that they reached, I think, was done so inappropriately. That should have been left to Congress. They should have just ruled on the facts and applied the law as it was at the time, not create this whole new system of laws that was applicable in Roe versus Wade. Somebody says smoking weed isn't a felony. It is in Arizona. Well, smoking weed's not a felony in Arizona, but being in possession of marijuana in Arizona is a felony. It's called a Class 6 felony. Chris Clements says, R&R, have you heard of the YouTuber disability activist that has been targeted by the police, harassed by the mob while in police, looked the other way, and is currently in prison with a $50,000 cash bond? That comes from Chris Clements. Chris, I have not. If you have a name, though, and you want to throw it into that chat, I'd be happy to take a look at it. The real battle has always been over when you believe life begins. I think that is a very astute point. I think a lot of people have arguments over that. We could change what qualifies as a felony. Most things that are felonies now were not even illegal when felons got the death penalty. Yeah, and so this is a huge thing, right? Like I just said, that in Arizona, marijuana violations are felonies. Okay, you can get charged with possession of marijuana, and I'm just talking about the green leaf. Okay, in California, legal. Colorado, legal. You can go to California, you can buy some green leaf marijuana flower, bring it over to Arizona. It's going to be a class 6 felony. Being in possession of marijuana is a class 6. It's a felony. Lose your right to vote, lose your right to firearms, lose your right to federal benefits. Something that's totally legal in California is now illegal in Arizona. It's a felony. Lose all of those rights. It's insane, but that's how our laws are. And that's just for the flower. If it is a distilled version of the THC, meaning if it's a vape, if it is edibles, gummies, anything like that, any of the tinctures, anything that's in that category, because it's not the leaf, it's the THC distilled down out of the leaf into a concentrate, they turn that from a class 6 into a class 4 felony. Class 4 felony. Do you know what the presumptive prison term on a class 4 felony is in Arizona? 2.5 years in prison, all right? Now, you're not going to get that for a first offense drug crime, but the presumptive prison term is 2.5 years. So if you have let's say you've got 2 prior drug convictions and you've been convicted of both of those, and you get a third marijuana violation just for possession of a vape pen, you're going to be on the books going to prison for 2.5 years. It's crazy. It's crazy. So were the founders, were they doing that? Were they putting people in prison for being in possession of marijuana? Were they taking away their gun rights? Were they taking away their right to vote for those offenses? I don't know. Amy Coney Barrett doesn't think so, and I tend to agree with her. USA Libertarian says first candidate to propose federal legalization gets my vote. You know, that has been something that I think is a great idea, and I don't know why one of the parties has not jumped on it. I had figured that the Democrats would jump on that issue and just make it, federally decriminalize possession of marijuana. And they didn't do it. Obama was in office. He had the Department of Justice. I think he told them to stop, enforcing it so much. But I remember during the early years, there were still, during the Obama administration, we started to see other states legalize it. And I remember seeing that there were raids taking place, and then those backed off. And I just don't know why either party has not seized on it. I think it would be a winning issue at the ballot. It's on the ballot in Arizona. I think it's like 50-50 right now. We're going to see if it squeaks by, but I don't know why that one of the politicians has not seized on it. There must be too many people out there who still oppose it and prefer to put people in prison for smoking a plant for some insane reason. Too many DEA agents would lose money. Yeah. Weed is a better painkiller than opioids, less side effects. War on drugs is a massive waste of time and resources, as well as stupid villainization of a vulnerable population. 100% correct. I see so many people come through our office. We probably 1,200, 1,500 people a year. A large portion of those are drug-related offenses. And it's really sad. These people need help. These people need treatment. These people need a way of living. They need some help, but they don't need to go to prison. They don't need to be charged with felonies. They don't need to lose a lot of their rights, and not participate in elections, not get federal benefits and all sorts of things just for drug stuff, especially the marijuana stuff. It's ridiculous. I think it's a huge, huge problem. Weed is safer than alcohol and cigarettes. Heavily favored by the polls. Why can the feds make weed illegal when they needed an amendment to make booze illegal? So they've just it's part of the statutes. Yeah, it's just part of the statutes. They just passed it as part of the federal laws. His name is Mike Nelson. He goes by Blind Justice. All right. Yeah, we'll write that one down. Mike Nelson. Drug war has been as successful as probation. B. Volkich says Democrats are always trying to change the definition of words. It is. It's so irritating to me. The Hunters Protection Act. Yeah, wow. I love hunting and I love protecting hunters. Therefore, I must support the Protection Act. Oh, wait, you mean it's going to ban handguns across the country and, assault rifles? Okay, well, that doesn't sound like much protection then for hunters, does it? Do you think mayors and governors like Wheeler, Brown, Whitmer can be legally sued by people and business owners? So I think that they are already being sued. So I think Governor Whitmer just got smacked down by one of the federal appeals courts. Court of Appeals, one of the district courts, circuit courts. And I have not read the opinion on it, but I did see the headline from the World Health Organization that said a lot of these lockdowns are not advisable anymore. Isn't that interesting? Well, the World Health Organization, it feels to me like they've been on every side of every issue for the last 6-7 months, right? Masks, no masks. Lockdowns, no lockdowns. So is anybody still listening to them anymore? Thoughts on Governor Whitmer ignoring the state Supreme Court ruling on extension of lockdowns and taking power of multiple branches. So I have not looked into that, honestly. I didn't know that she was ignoring the Supreme Court ruling. I did not know that. I will look into that for sure. It is illegal because of the prison complex. Do you know how many deaths I had to make because of pot? F that plant. Yeah, a lot of people in prison for marijuana. It's just ridiculous. A lot of people. Absolutely ridiculous, which is another big reason I've got a lot of issues with Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. In my mind, these are two of the most tough on crime people ever to run for office. Can you name anybody else? Joe Biden passed like 4 or 5 different criminal legal bills. We've covered them. We had the 1994 crime bill. We had all of the other ones we've covered on the channel. Go back. You can look in the archives and find them. We covered 4 or 5 different criminal bills that he passed, all really criminalizing drugs. In large part, a lot of the drugs that impacted the black community more than anybody. He passed a mandatory crack cocaine penalties, mandatory incarceration, reduced all sorts of other alternatives. And it was this tough on crime, just massive surge during the 80s and 90s. And then we look around and his running mate is Kamala Harris, who was a prosecutor and prosecuted people and put them in prison and put them in jail for these drug offenses. And now they're trying to run away from that record because the population of America is just sick and tired of putting people in prison for drugs. But they're trying to run away from that. We saw during the vice presidential debate last week, which I don't think we covered here, about her, running through her list of 5 different things that she's going to do to impose, to really fight for true justice reform. And in my mind, way too little, way too late. I don't know how they're getting away with that. The media is not calling them out on any of that at all. But what I cannot think of a person or a group of people who are in political office who are more responsible for incarceration of people than these two. And they're getting away with it. It's wild. The only felonies should be murder, adultery, and perjury. Hearing Protection Act would remove suppressors from the 1934 Firearms Act. Stupid to be so regulated. Okay, what do you think about their non-answers on packing the court? I think it's embarrassing. I think it's disqualifying, quite frankly. I covered a lot of that at the beginning of the show. You may have missed it. But I think it's totally disqualifying. It's one of the biggest questions. It's one of the biggest duties of a president is to nominate people to the Supreme Court. It's critical, right? This comes up every election. Donald Trump, when he ran in 2016 and this time, he's released a name of the different judges that he would propose to put on the court because it's that important, because people want to vet those people. What is your position? What is your judicial philosophy? How are you going to impact the Supreme Court? It's one of the most important duties of the president. All of the other stuff is important, but it's incidental in large part to our way of life. And appointing somebody to the Supreme Court, somebody that's going to be on there for 50, 60 years, it's massive. So for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris to refuse to answer that is disqualifying, in my opinion. We'll see if they answer it. They won't. Why exactly is that a presidential duty? I'm curious, actually. Well, it's because it's in the Constitution. So the Constitution says specifically that the president nominates somebody to the Supreme Court, and then the Senate advises and consents. So they have a constitutional obligation to do that. It's written in there. A lot of the other things that a president does, like all the glad handing and running around and rallies and all that stuff, it's like incidental. It's marginally important to their duty. It's like not even in their job description. And nominating somebody to the Supreme Court is. So it is important. Yeah, and Zulu says, which is exactly right, they should just say that they won't pack the court, get the power, and do it anyways. It's legal, right? Isn't that the test? Yeah, so they can. Yeah, I mean, they can do it. And the only reason they're not answering that question is because it's a complicated political situation. If they say that they're going to pack the court, we know that I think most of America agrees that that is unpopular, right? We don't want to change that. It's been this way for 150 years. It works. They don't want to change that. So if they come out and say, yeah, we're going to pack that thing, baby, get ready. We got another 5, 6, 7, 8 judges ready to get thrown on there. All of the moderates, all of the centrists, all of the independents are going to get really concerned about that. So they can't come out and admit it. But if they turn around and say, no, listen, we're not going to pack the court. We're not going to make any adjustments. We believe in the judiciary. We believe that, these judges are going to be impartial. Then that's going to immediately alienate their most dedicated, loyal followers. And so the entire left wing is going to say, wait a minute, you're telling us you're just going to sit there and you're going to let a 6-3 conservative court dictate our lives for the next 50 years and you're not going to do anything about it? They're all going to be alienated. So they can't answer it. They can't. They're stuck right in the middle. They have to continue going down this road of non-answers. It's the best thing politically for them. Half of SCOTUS appointees had been confirmed within 40 days. Yeah, we covered that. I have a slide from that we covered. We sort of showed it. I think Ginsburg was like even 33 days. Very low, very short nomination process. Auditing America. Curious about your thoughts about the Matt Doloff shooting that happened in Denver over the weekend. Perhaps tomorrow's show. Yeah. So I think I'm actually going to make a video about that separately because I gotta dive into that a little bit further. I want to go through the videos and things, but I am going to certainly cover that because I think that is going to be a case that follows for sure. So yeah, thanks for flagging that. Got a couple things. I was out last week. I had a confirmation. I didn't have a confirmation hearing. I had an event. I had a convention that I had to go to, another C word. So I had to go to a convention and it was very good. Learned a lot, good information, nothing really applicable to what we talk about here, but it was all good. And so that was Thursday, Friday, but we're going to get back on schedule. So we're going to have a lot more live shows and my production schedule is going to get back on track also. So I know we've got a lot to talk about, a lot of updates from all over the place. We've got, Rittenhouse had an extradition hearing. Daniel Prude's officers are complaining, saying that the autopsy doesn't match. We have the Doloff case that I know just happened. There's a lot going on here. So we are going to just sort of increase the pace here, but we are going to structure the channels a little bit differently because I know a lot of the feedback that I gotten from all of you amazing people is that we were just sort of clipping too many things and it was kind of becoming spammy on this channel and we don't want that. So had to rethink some of it a little bit, but I think we've got a good framework for how we're going to move forward and we're excited about it. And GG says, hey, I had a weird question pop into my head recently. Could the president appoint herself to the Supreme Court? I read an article about that. It's funny you asked. I read an article about that and I think the answer is yes. So this is one of those complex constitutional questions, but I don't think that there's anything that exists that says that they can't do that. The only check on that would be the Senate, right? So the Senate could say, no, we're not gonna nominate you, but there's nothing in the law. I mean, at least in the Constitution that I've read, I haven't read that provision recently, but nothing that I have read that says that they can't do that. And people were even floating this idea with Obama, right? Like could he appoint himself to the Supreme Court and then sit on it forever? I'm sure there's a counter argument to that. It's an interesting thought experiment. I don't think it would ever happen just due to pure politics. The president would have to appoint himself or herself, and then the Senate would have to confirm that individual. And is that going to happen? Probably not. Nobody's going to want a president to be a senator for life or to be a judge for life. Nobody's going to want Donald Trump to be a judge on the Supreme Court. Like, that's not a good fit for him. Better on the president, better in the executive than in the judge's robe. Felix Lopez says, I think the Democrat would only pack the court if the Supreme Court declared Obamacare unconstitutional and maybe strike down some LGBT and civil rights gains. If not, I think it's just bluster. I there's some historical precedent for that, actually. So when FDR first proposed to expand the court to 15 judges, it was 9. He proposed to expand it to 15. And part of his mechanism for doing that was to say that if judges don't retire by the age that they're the age of 70, then he gets to appoint somebody to sort of, extend the size of the court. Now, FDR was a president for 4 terms. Remember, he died in his 4th term. So he had a lot of political willpower. He had a lot of different agencies and bureaucracies that he sort of created to support his time in office. And when he made that threat, so he did not expand the court, but he threatened to. This was on the record, and the American public wasn't particularly happy about it. But only the threat was enough to cause the Supreme Court to change their tune. If you remember, this was back coming out of the the Depression. So we had the Depression, and people were really starving and hurting, and the country was not in a good situation. And so what FDR did is he created all of these civil agencies to say, we're going to start this work program and this education program and build all these things and all that stuff. And the Supreme Court said, hey, you can't do that. You don't have the power to do that. Those are congressional powers. You can't just go ahead and start creating all of these different things. So the Supreme Court started striking those things down. Then FDR came back and said, okay, well, that's fine. You don't want to give me what I want? We're just going to double the size of the court. We're going to turn it from 9 into 15. We're going to appoint all these judges, and we're going to get what we want, whether you like it or not. As soon as he made that threat, Supreme Court justices, everybody who was already on the court, they changed their tune. As soon as the cases started coming up in front of them, they started approving them. And we saw a major shift in American law. We saw the government, the powers and the authority of the federal government grow massively because the Supreme Court approved it all, because they were scared that their legitimacy was going to be just trampled by the federal government, in this case, FDR and his administration. This is a great question. Why is Kyle's defense team trying to delay the extradition? This feels like it's bad for the defense and try to choose an unbiased, in their favor jury. I don't know why they're trying to delay this, but it is starting to get a little bit troubling in my mind. I don't know what they're doing, quite frankly. I'm going to try to obtain those documents. I want to see more about what happened at that extradition hearing. I know what happened on Friday, but I am a little bit concerned about it, quite frankly. I'm not real sure that they know what they're doing or they've ever been through the process. I just don't know. And everything just keeps getting continuance. I understand that, but this entire time, Kyle Rittenhouse is sitting in custody, and it seems to me like his defense team is just continually asking for more time. We want more time. They filed their petition for habeas corpus the day before, so the night before Friday. They filed it Thursday night. Friday came around, and they had just filed it. Then the government needed time to respond to it, so there's response time. So they continued it out another 2 weeks, and they're gonna respond. And so this thing is just going on and on and on. And he's gonna be sitting there for months. So I'm not real sure what they're doing, quite frankly. Don't have a lot of confidence in his defense team right now. Do you have a favorite Supreme Court justice? So let's see. It's pretty obvious, I think, but it's going to have to be Judge Scalia. Yeah. Even though he's not good for the criminal justice or criminal defense, I really enjoyed reading his opinions. I thought he was brilliant. He had this way of crafting arguments that was just sort of almost like an art form. Very wild. Now, a lot of his decisions I don't agree with, right? I'm a criminal defense attorney, and he was pretty hard on civil liberties for criminal defendants. We kind of joke that he never met a criminal that he didn't like. He never met, or that he liked. He never met a cop that he didn't believe. Every cop was just kind of okay. And so he would touch on some of the constitutional protections, but then he would find a way around it. And it was always well done and very, very crafty and very clever and very logical. And you could understand the arguments. And this is what I'm talking about. You can disagree with the outcome in a legal case, but if the argument and the logic and the reasoning is sound and it's applying the law, then that's what it is. And you can have critiques of that, but Justice Scalia, the way that he wrote, and I just had a lot of fun reading his opinions, and he was very sort of vitriolic at times. He said his word, he said what he meant, and he spoke the way he felt. And I appreciate that. I appreciate authenticity. It's a lot of the reasons that I appreciate the Trump administration, because it's very direct. It's very, just we just say it. If you don't like it, if it's not politically correct, it's too bad. It's the way it is. And so when I see a lot of these politicians on both sides of the aisle, the Republicans do it, Trump administration does it, all of them do it, but they sugarcoat these things and they change the meanings of words. Like we spent a lot of time today talking about court packing. Court packing means something, and they're changing the definition of that word to suit themselves. And I don't like that at all. I think it's really hurtful for society. I think that definitions matter, words matter. And if we start to water down all of the language, then it stops having meaning. We talked about this with, the white supremacy stuff, right? If every single person who ever existed is a white supremacist, well, then nobody is. If everybody's a white supremacist just because you're white, and I've been called that on this show. I've been called a lot of names on this show just because, I don't know why, but I don't think I've ever indicated that I have any proclivities towards any of that stuff. Of course I don't. But people just jump to that conclusion and they start throwing around these labels, and you throw it around enough and stuff stops having any meaning to it. So I appreciated Scalia's candor and his just tenacity with his language. It was a lot of fun to read his cases, and he was an icon in American law. I think it's a dangerous game the Republicans are playing with rushing through this confirmation after they blocked Merrick Garland. They wait and lose the election. They keep 5-4, win 6-3. It is a little bit of a dangerous game. I don't think there's any question about that. So if the Republicans, they could push this through, and the American electorate could be very unhappy with that, and they could punish them at the polls. So they could win the Supreme Court case or the Supreme Court battle, but they could lose the presidency. They could lose the Senate. And so people are weighing those, right? A Supreme Court is a lifetime appointment. A 6-3 Supreme Court would be a lifetime change. But if you do that, let's just game this out, right? If you confirm Amy Coney Barrett, she gets on, it's now 6-3. So the Republicans are now celebrating. Yeah, we got it. It's 6-3. We've changed the balance of power for the court. We've got a judge who's going to be on there for the next 40, 50 years. Great. We won. Then the Democrats have a massive sweep at the ballots. They win the Senate. They win the presidency. They pack the court. They add on 4 more judges. Now the Republicans not only lost the presidency and the Senate, but they also lost the court. So it's a huge risk. It's a really big gamble. On the flip side of that, though, you have to ask yourself, what if the Republicans didn't do anything right now? What if they just said, Trump said, yeah, you're right. We've got the election. It's coming up in 28 days. We're just going to let this thing ride. Do you think that the Republican Party would live with that? Do you think that anybody, any conservative, anybody on that side of the aisle, do you think that they would just say, oh, that's cool. That sounds reasonable. Yeah, we're going to still show up and vote for you anyways, even though we have this massive opportunity in front of us and you're not taking advantage of it. We're just going to continue to support you. Do you think that would happen? I don't think so at all. I think they would also get punished at the polls. And so they are playing with fire a little bit, but just like the Democrats who can't admit whether they're going to pack the court or not, it's fickle. They're stuck between a rock and a hard place, both parties. Do you think we should abolish the 22nd Amendment? The 22nd Amendment. What is that one? No person shall be. Oh, okay. So yeah, here's what we've got. No, so this is the term limits for the presidency. No, I don't think so. I'm very happy with that term limit. Yeah, and I would like to see Congress have term limits also, quite frankly. I'm tired of those people being in office for 47 years, 44 years. How long has Joe Biden been in office for? 40-something years? It's amazing. It's amazing these people who are in office for 40-something years, 33, 4 decades, longer than I have been alive on this planet. And they've been in Washington and they've been spending all that time there, and they blame the problems on everybody else. It's everybody else. It's the entrepreneurs. It's the small business owners. It's the people who aren't paying their fair share. They want to blame everybody else except their own incompetence. So I know I'm fully in support of term limits. Why don't we vote for Supreme Court justices? Guess it's in the Constitution. Yeah, and that's really the legal answer. It's because Constitution doesn't call for that. But the bigger reason, the philosophical reason, is because the court is supposed to be apolitical. It's supposed to be not a position where people have to manipulate their positions to get elected, right? If the court is going to be deciding some complicated issues, some difficult issues, and we want those people to be free from the shackles of normal politics. You can see, do we want more politicians on the Supreme Court? I mean, look at all the flip-flopping we see from all of these politicians from both sides. They don't answer any questions. They don't take any difficult stands. They don't make any hard decisions because they're all worried about being reelected. They don't have the freedom to speak their minds, because if they do, they're going to alienate some section of the electorate that is going to result in them not being reelected. So what we have now is all of these identity politics from the left. We have all of this, just this garbage just across the board from all of these politicians who just kind of tell us what we want to hear. They don't make any difficult decisions. They don't actually solve any problems, because if they solve the problems, then we wouldn't need their wisdom and support to get us out of the problems. So they just perpetuate these problems on and on and on. We don't want that in the court. We want the judges to be apolitical, to rule on the facts before them, and to not be beholden, to not rule against somebody or in favor of somebody in order to secure their election or their re-election chances. So I think it makes sense to not have them be elected. But like I said, there's a lot of people who think that this system is just outdated. I do not happen to be one of them. Not even close. Somebody asked about who I'm voting for. That's 48 Kingmaster. Well, that's a complicated question there. It is complicated. I think I'll save that maybe for another video as we get closer to the election. But I think you can, just as a quick overview, I think you can have a pretty good understanding of where I stand, at least as it comes to the criminal justice issues. I've spent a lot of time talking about how grossed out I am about the Biden-Harris campaign, at least with their issues as they relate to criminal justice. The only candidate here who's done anything to actually reform the criminal justice system recently is Donald Trump with the First Step Act. We talked a little bit about that act and how that impacts people. I think it is a good start, and I'm in support of that. I'm in support of reform. Now, the Biden administration, truth be told, they have said that they've got some pretty big plans for criminal justice reform. We saw Kamala Harris go through it. They have a list. They have a plan. They're talking about it, and maybe they'll implement it. I don't know. But as far as I can tell, for the last 20, 30 years, both of these people have been sending people to prison, not the other way. And now they're having this come to light, moment because the politics have changed. Used to be very popular to be tough on crime. Now, not so much. Right now, it's about justice reform. Little do people know that these two people are responsible for incarcerating more people than I think anybody else in elected office today. Truly. And I mean that. Yeah, John Gray says you're definitely a conservative libertarian. Libertarian is probably the best label if you had to throw one on there, for sure. I'm pro-freedom. I am very distrustful of government for a lot of reasons, and I would like to see more people have more autonomy with their lives. Less government intrusion, less hand-holding, less of this parent-child relationship. I can't stand that the government thinks that we're like children and that we need them to do all of these things in the world. In my mind, the government is one of the biggest impediments to the things that I want to do with my life. There's nobody else in the world who takes a portion of my paycheck every time. There's no other entity that mandates that I do all of these ridiculous things all of the time. The government is the only entity in my life that does that. My mom does some of that too, tells me how to do things and stuff like that, but that's okay. I'm not married, so I don't have a wife doing that either. Biden is basically saying Trump won't pack the court. That's not just dumb. It is evil. He's starting a race to the bottom. If Biden does decide to push to expand the Supreme Court, do you think he would have the votes? There are a few Democratic senators in red states that might not be on board. Yeah, I'm not real sure that they're going to have the votes for it. I think I agree with that. I think that if they win the Senate and they win the presidency, it's going to be a question of how many of what the margins are in the Senate. So right now, when we were talking about Amy Coney Barrett's nomination, it's looking like it's going to be 52 Republicans to 48 Democrats. So 52 to 48. And so if that shifts, like if it flips, right? So the Democrats have 52 to 48. Are the Republicans, are some of those two, in other words, the Republicans would need 2 or 3 senators at that point to flip from the Democrats to the Republicans. Quite frankly, the Democrats are very, very good at keeping their caucus in line. they vote together, they speak together, they use the same talking points together, they come out every time and, reclaiming my time, and, the ACA is the new talking point, and election is already underway, and the Republicans are responsible for court packing, not the Democrats. Their language is very consistent. It's very uniform. We see this with Nancy Pelosi all the time, right? And we saw this with Amy Coney Barrett and some of that. With who's the other one? The other ABC. Andrea Ocasio-Cortez, AOC, right, was the other one. AOC was, sort of nudging at Pelosi, and then she fell in line. She stepped out a little bit, but she got back in line pretty quick because they're good at keeping their caucus together. The Republicans, not so much. Susan Collins from Maine, Mitt Romney from Utah. We had the other one, Lisa Murkowski from Alaska. They're all wishy-washy. They're all squishy. The Democrats are a lot less squishy. So if they seize that, the Democrats may say, look, you are voting to expand this court, whether you like it or not. We know you're going to lose at the next term, but you're still voting for it. And it'll probably fall in line on that. Don't worry about AOC. The world ends in 10 days anyway, 10 years anyways. I remember that. Remember when Al Gore said that? I think that was in like 2000 when that Inconvenient Truth movie came out. We're all going to be dead in 10 years. It's now like 20 years later, I think. And I think we're still doing okay. All right. Well, listen, everybody. Been going for a while now. I really appreciate you being here. And it's time to wrap up the show. So we will be back here tomorrow at the same time. So it's going to be 4 p.m. We're going to do more analysis on the Supreme Court nomination stuff. It's going to be a lot of that this week. I am going to try to, probably off of the live shows, do updates on Doloff and Rittenhouse and a lot of these other cases. But there's just so much going on right now. And there's so much going on, I think, even after the election. So this is not the end of this. We're going to have a lot of conversations about the Supreme Court, about the election, about the lawsuits that are going to be taking place after the election. We want to make sure that we are staying on top of our cases. So we'll go through a little bit of the calendar tomorrow and the rest of the week. If you have not already done so, hit the subscribe button. And I would really love it if you shared this video, if you shared it with somebody else and said, hey, we have a good conversation here every day at 4 p.m. That would be a lot of fun. So I'll wrap it up right here one more time. Subscribe. Thank you so much. Have a wonderful evening.